Hi there. This is Scott Marker, and here's another episode of Treasure Valley NIA QuickTips. What this is I'm a franchise owner of Network in Action, and through that, I've built out 3 professional referral groups, and I get to meet a lot of high caliber people here in the Treasure Valley. And I built this podcast because I just, I meet such kind of great businesses here in the Valley. I just want to get the word out because a lot of times, they're gems that need to get out their stories. And today is a perfect example. So why don't you introduce yourself, Ralph?
Hi, my name's Ralph Godfrey. I'm the president and CEO of our Godfrey Consulting, and I'm a forensic flooring consultant and certified flooring inspector.
Wow. Like the first time I met you, I heard that and I was like, what the heck is that? So real quick, like explain. So what is that? What's that mean?
Forensic flooring consultant is nothing more than a person who does scientific investigation into why flooring installations fail. We study the material, the installation process. Was the specification correct? Was it the right material for the intended use? Was there a mistake in the actual installation or floor preparation of the materials? And was it sold properly? There's a whole series of steps that go into it.
That gives a good overview. It says, you're like the forensic, other types of investigators going in there just trying to reverse engineer it to figure out what went wrong.
Well, I jokingly told my cardiologist the other day, he asked me, what is it that you actually do? And I said, I'm a floor doctor.
Yeah.
I actually go in and evaluate, just like you do with me. I evaluate the problems, and the facts pretty much speak for themselves.
That's awesome. So, hey, when did you get started doing this?
Well, I started in the floor covering business in 1968. I didn't start our Godfrey Consulting until 1982. In between them, I worked as a retail and a wholesale salesman for floor covering. I worked for a flooring manufacturer. And for 4 years, I was the vice president of the largest commercial flooring contractor in the United States. And then I started my own contracting business. And I learned very quickly, it's much better to be in there solving people's problems than trying to avoid creating them as a contractor.
Right.
I had more calls for consulting than I did contracting.
Yeah, prevention, an ounce of prevention, that kind of saying. It's so true.
And that's my goal completely is I figure what I'm doing, if it ends up in litigation, then I haven't done my job effectively.
Right. If they hire you up front to avoid that.
Right.
Yeah. So how many states are you in?
Well,
how many states have you been asked to do litigation in?
I performed litigation in 17 states, plus I acted as an agent for companies from England and from Mexico in litigation in the United States.
Wow, that is impressive. I love that. And now you're here in the Treasure Valley, Idaho, right? So here's a quick one that what brought you back?
Well, I was born and raised in Treasure Valley. I graduated from high school from Emmett and attended Boise State University. And then I decided I wanted to go to a big city, and I went to Portland, Oregon, when it was a lovely place to live. And eventually I ended up in Southern California for 45 years and finally could not stand the wackiness of California anymore, and I moved back home. That's
awesome. So now we kind of got the background there. So now let's bring it to here in the Treasure Valley, right? So what we have a flooring contractor here, and they're thinking, why should I, how can Ralph help me out, right? So I'm an owner of a flooring company, and I'm like, I see this podcast, and I go, so how can Ralph help me?
There's 2 different ways that I provide services. One is pre-project consultation, where we help the person evaluate what they're going to do and help them do it correctly. And the second part of it is where there's a problem and they need assistance in resolving it. And in this particular section, I can tell you in 40 years, nobody's ever called me and paid me money to go look at a successful project. It's always been something with a problem.
Right.
And so what I would tell a flooring contractor is basically know what the parameters of the project is, not what you think it is, actually figure out what it is that your client wants to accomplish. How do they want to accomplish it? Are those methods and goals realistic with what they're working on? And most important, do you as a contractor truly have the ability to provide a level of service, installation, and products that the client needs? Those sound like oversimplistic situations, but they all come into play when something happens. And one of the biggest ones is they don't always have the experienced personnel to provide the type of installation, or if they have questions about the type of installation and the material that's going to be installed, and they don't think it's the right material for the job, they need to step up and question it.
Right. So give me an example. So because like the difference between a home, right? Something you could help somebody out, like maybe it's a fancy home, it's here in the Treasure Valley, it's a $3 million home, which is a really nice home in the Valley. So you have a $3 million home versus you do a lot of like commercial, like hospitals, right? So a local hospital here. So give me the differences, and kind of, you can't get the whole thing, but kind of some samples of how you could help a flooring contractor with a fancy home versus help somebody, putting some flooring in a hospital.
Well, the main thing with the fancy home is you're dealing with somebody who's spending their money, their individual money, and probably a fairly substantial amount. And so you want to know the who, what, where, why, and how of your customer and what their needs are. And if you answer those questions, then you'll have a good idea of what he really wants. And don't be afraid to direct him to a better product that would be more suitable to their needs. They may reject your proposal or your suggestion, but at least you will have tried to send them in the right direction.
Right.
Sometimes the customer is always right. They want what they want when they want it. So then you have to put your big boy pants on and step up and say, okay, here are the possible issues you could have with this particular product with your home environment or whatever. And so be completely open with them. Don't be afraid to disclose it. You may lose a job over this, but better to lose a job because you told them the truth up front than have to go back and spend thousands and thousands of dollars to correct something that could have been avoided.
No, you're so right too, and that made me think too. Which will lead into my next question. I'm not an attorney, but if somebody says something like that, make them sign something saying, "Hey, I'm I'm recommending this, and there are some drawbacks to putting this type of flooring in this space, but you're good. You understand the chance. You understand all the consequences of it."
That's an excellent question, and we tell all of the people that we work with, one of the part of your equipment that your installers or your project superintendent should have, it should be a one-page waiver letter.
Yeah.
And it's just a simple document that you go to your client, whether it's a commercial job or residential job, and say, look, this is a problem. We can't install this and provide a warranty for you under these circumstances. Here's why. And so we're putting you on notice about this. If you want us to go ahead, then sign this waiver and we'll continue for the plans and specifications. But we're putting you on notice that if this condition occurs, you don't have a warranty. And that protects you. It won't keep you from getting sued. But what it does do is when you go in the courtroom, Your Honor, we told them, don't do this. And they chose to do it and went forward. So we met our contract and we did our due diligence. That way you performed your services as a professional and you've advised them. And they've insisted that you do it their way. So you did. And they became responsible for the failure.
So give me now let's look at a hospital. Give me an example of a hospital that you went to that the flooring contractor was obviously wrong. By the time you did your investigation, you found out that they were wrong. Give us an example of what could go wrong, like in a hospital setting, putting flooring in, and what type of flooring. Because sometimes people don't understand flooring could be hardwood floors, tile, carpet. So give an example of a hospital where
hospital floors primarily, although they use a multiple group of flooring, they'll use carpet tile, they'll use broadloom carpet in some areas. The majority of hospital carpet is resilient flooring, sheet vinyl, rubber sheet vinyl, tile, stone, ceramic, and some of those things. The majority of it is sheet vinyl and sheet rubber flooring because it's easy to take care of, it's flat. And the big thing being used in the hospital today is what they call luxury vinyl plank. And that's called LVP is the term you hear thrown around.
Right.
And that's nothing more than resilient flooring that's it looks like wood or it looks like stone. They can do all kinds of things with it. And they glue that directly to the concrete. One of the problems with luxury vinyl plank is that if you don't get the floor really flat and you don't use a real high quality adhesive, you have problems with the plank staying on the floor because all hospitals today are equipped with rolling beds, equipment, diagnostic equipment, rolling storage shelves, all kinds of heavy equipment that are on these big rubber tires. And when you get to the intersecting corridors, these heavyweight things have to pivot, and it puts a tremendous amount of pressure right on that point of contact. So it will transfer soil onto the surface of the flooring, and it will also cause distortion of the adhesive underneath and the flooring material, and it'll cause that product to move. And eventually you start having planks or tiles come loose from the floor. And that's a big problem. And that has to do more with specification and selection of product than it does with the actual installation. But many times they don't do the proper procedures. The biggest things that we are seeing now in all types of installation are that buildings aren't completely enclosed and the buildings do not have a temperature and relative humidity control system in place when they're doing the work. And all manufacturers, all flooring, all adhesives, all coatings, all require some specific things. One, buildings got to be completely enclosed. They have to have all the windows in, the doors in, and they have to be so they're secure from outside elements. The second thing is they have to have temperature controls and relative humidity controls. And for our purposes, we're going to use the general terms in the industry. Your relative humidity must be between 30% relative humidity and 55%, and the temperatures must be between 50 degrees and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. If you can maintain those temperatures, you're probably not going to have much of a problem. The problems occur when you can't have that. A lot of times they have temporary heat, propane heaters, things like that.
Yep.
Problem with propane heaters is for every gallon of propane you burn, you dump 1.5 quarts of water into the atmosphere.
Oh.
And you can't run those things all night long if there's nobody on site. You have to shut them down. And so what happens is, as the temperature cools, the moisture in the air condenses on the concrete and it's absorbed into the concrete. So when you come back out the next day, you've got more moisture in the concrete than you've accounted for. And as a buildup over days and days and days of this, you can have problems, and all of a sudden 6 months later, you've got a moisture problem underneath your flooring. And then it's a matter of sorting out the why and the who. And but those are the biggest problems that we have: is enclosure, acclimation, and the third one is proper substrate preparation. Are they abrading the floor to get it clean? And in order to install most conventional adhesives and coatings, you have to treat the concrete with either shot blasting, which is shooting beads into the floor, or diamond grinding. You have to remove the skin of the concrete and any surface contamination. And all wet work, painting, drywall, all of that stuff should be done prior to installation of the flooring.
Wow.
That doesn't always happen, but it should.
Yeah. See, and this type of something that just reinforces why people should talk to you. Because like I said, one of these things that go wrong could be millions of dollars, in lawsuits. So that leads to my next question. So what advice, how could you give to an attorney?
Well, when someone like me is brought into a litigation case, it's generally there may or may not have been litigation filed. In any case, we're going into the discovery process, and we're going to be allowed to go and investigate and interview and have interrogatories and review documents and all of that thing. My advice to the attorney is, if you hire an expert, listen to him and be very open with him about what your theory of the case is. Don't be afraid that you're going to disclose something that can blow up in your face. If an attorney comes to me and explains his theory of the case and what he thinks the theory is, then when I do my investigation, I'm better equipped to determine, do the facts fit his theory? And if the facts don't fit his theory, I'm going to tell him, hey, this is what you want, but here's what the facts are telling us. Now, after my investigation, I can't necessarily say I can go ahead and testify to support your case. If I can't, I can tell you what to do to minimize your damage. But if you don't tell your expert everything, and then all of a sudden when you get into depositions and trial and things like that, and people pull surprises on him, everybody ends up looking foolish, especially the attorney, because he had the ability to avoid it.
Yeah.
And roughly 95% of all cases where litigation is filed are settled outside of court. There's not a lot of this courtroom drama. I've been retained in more than 1,100 litigations, and I've only testified in 105.
Wow.
So it's been deposed in a lot more than that. But a couple of things. One, when you make that decision to go to trial, the case becomes much more expensive at that point. A lot more money involved. And the second thing is, now you're going to be proven right or wrong. Depends on the attorney. Some attorneys do not like to litigate. They don't like trials. Others live for it.
Yeah.
That's all they do is litigate. They'll take over from someone else and litigate the matter. I like working with litigators because they're not afraid to tell you the whole package, and they want information from you. Is there something we missed? A lot of times attorneys don't want to know what they missed.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's been a very rewarding, it's certainly a challenging experience, and it's not for the faint of heart. My wife tells me that she can tell the difference between me going to an arbitration, deposition, and testimony at trial, because each one is more severe than the other, and my moods change accordingly. It's the old athlete coming in. You get the mano a mano thing going, and now I've got to go out and perform.
Right.
And so it's very interesting. It's very challenging. It's one of the reasons why I'm still doing what I'm doing.
Well, so that leads to this is like that. So what's one of the most interesting clients you've ever had?
Probably the most interesting client I've ever had was about 20 years ago. And at that time, a lady scientist in Pennsylvania had come up with a conclusion that off-gassing from carpet was killing people. And unfortunately, they put this lady on 60 Minutes. And her whole premise was she took free fish tanks that she bought at Walmart. She connected them with glass tubes. And in the front, in the number one station, she had a hot air gun and a hanging circle of carpet. And she blew hot air through that chamber into the middle chamber. And in the middle chamber, they had 6 tubes on each side. And into those tubes, they inserted white rats. So that just their head and their shoulders stuck out into the second tube, into the second container. And then the third container was the collector and cooling point for the hot air. And so she blew this hot air through this inverted circle of carpet, which had absolutely nothing to do with the way carpet's used, by the way. And it blew it into the second chamber. And you know what? Every one of these rats died. And she repeated the test 20 times, and every time, every rat died. Well, people who did further investigation said the rats would have died anyway, because anytime you stop the body of anything, when you've got just the head and the shoulders out and you got it in a glass tube, body's going to suffocate.
Right.
Because it can't properly function. And so DuPont, Allied Fiber, Monsanto, Amoco, everybody in the fiber business tried to reproduce this, and they produced it was bunkum. Yeah. But in that one Sunday, my office got over 500 phone calls from people wanting me to come out and test their carpet. And I just flat told them, no, I will not do it. It's bogus, it's bad science, it's junk. Well, it's on 60 Minutes. Well, call Ed Bradley then, talk to him. But this one lady called me, and she called me 3 times. And each time she called me, she was more desperate. And it was a lady who was in her late 70s, and she lived down in Chula Vista, California, and she lived in a brand new double-wide trailer house. And she said, it's to the point, I've been to allergists, I've been to all of these different doctors, they can't tell me what's wrong. I've rewritten my will. I've dispersed everything that I can. And I really feel that I'm going to die if I don't find out what's causing this. She said, I'd like your help. Well, she was so pleading and everything that I said, you know what? I'll see what I can do. So I went down and beautiful new home, it's probably a 2-year-old mobile home. But if there's one thing that gives off a lot of off-gassing, it's a mobile home. Because everything in it's got a lacquered finish or it's made out of a synthetic material. But that's really not a problem. So one AM, I said, tell me what happens. She says, well, I'm okay during the day. Don't have any problems at all during the day. She says, at night, when I go to bed, I'm okay. She says, I have an overhead fan. I have an overhead fan on, and I have a window open, so I get lots of air. And she said, about 2 hours, 3 hours into my sleep routine, I wake up and I can't breathe. And so I get up, I come out into the front room, and I sit in my recliner, and I watch TV, and I go to sleep, and I wake up there in the morning, and I'm fine. And so I'm looking around the house, and I don't see anything unusual. We'll get back into the bedroom. And I take one step into the bedroom and step on the carpet, and dust comes up. And I look at the window, and there's a film of white material on the screen where the window's open. And I reach up and scrape the top of the fan, and there's a white powder on there. Walk around, I would go in the bathroom and I can see residue, what looks like baby powder. And I asked her, I said, do you use baby powder? She said, yeah, I use it twice a day. And I said, do you apply it here? She says, yeah. So I'm walking around the bedroom, baby powder comes up out of the carpet every time. And I said, well, how many times a week do you vacuum your carpet? She says, I vacuum it once a week, which is what most people do.
Yeah.
And so I said, I think I know what your problem is. What she was doing, she was putting powder on before she went to bed and when she first got up. Well, when she first gets up, the powder in the air settles on the carpet. When she applies the powder at night, and she used a lot of it, it got into the air. And then when she turned the fan on, it started pulling the powder out of the carpet.
Oh,
And there'd be a buildup of it. And it would cause the congestion and she couldn't breathe. And so then she'd go in the front room. There's no fan, there's no powder, no problem. So I had a friend of mine from Surf Pro come out and they completely wiped down the entire house. And I told her, I said, well, if you still want to use baby powder, you got to go out on the back porch at the second bathroom and put it on there. Don't do it here in your bedroom. And she called me back about 3 months later and she said, since I cleaned the house, I haven't had one problem. And this lady thought she was going to die. So that was unusual, and it was also the most interesting case for the obvious reasons.
Right.
You really got to help somebody. And it was a totally different thing than you would ever normally think of running into. Bad information from this one lady scientist who, until that point, from what I understand and reading up on her, was fairly well respected.
Right.
But that bad science diminished her career.
yeah.
And it also created a lot of problems because talking with people like myself around the country, they also had a rash of people who wanted them to inspect. So you don't realize how much doubt and damage you can do when you put something out there. You got to make sure of what you're saying. And that's why what's nice about what I do is the facts speak for themselves. I can go out and I can have a theory and I can think this and this and this and this, but then I've got to look at the actual facts of the matter. And we have a saying in my business, the floor never lies, only people lie.
Right.
Because the floor will do just exactly what the laws of physics tell it to do. And then people try to put together their version of the story that best suits them. So,
yeah. Best gets them out of
yeah.
whatever side they're in, get them out of trouble. So, hey, this has been great. This is a good, just really good. Let kind of people know kind of what you do and what's here in the Valley that most people don't know is. So what would be the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Someone wanted to get a hold of me. The best way would be to call me on my cell phone at 858-688-1189.
Perfect. And I'll put it in the show notes so people can get that too.
Right.
So, hey, this has been great. And I really appreciate it. And like I said, flooring companies or something like that, it'd be great to reach out to you. And you even mentioned that you'd do some complimentary training for their salespeople.
Yeah, we have a program for flooring contractors, design firms, any property management company, everybody like that. We can teach their people what to look for to avoid a lot of these mistakes. And especially with the flooring contractor, we can teach sales staff the proper questions to ask about the client to find out what they really need. And then the installation people and their commercial department or whatever, what to look for when you're looking at a project, when you actually get on the project to look for things that could hinder your progress or create a problem for you.
Right.
And they're pretty simple things to do. And no, we offer that training to anybody's company free of charge.
Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, this has been great because I wanted to introduce this to the listeners. And hey, I appreciate your time today. And this is another episode of Treasure Valley NIA Quick Tips. And I appreciate you, Ralph.
Thank you, Scott. I enjoyed being with you.